is high. But most people, I would say over 80% of people, when asked, and I never used to talk to people about Jesus or God when I first met them, I talk about faith. I talk about, where's your faith? Is your faith in your money? Is it in your job? Do you have a faith in anything spiritual at all? And when you press them about God, over 80% of people say, yeah, I believe there's a God. Not sure how he looks or how it works, but I believe. Now, if you take across the population of this country, 80% of people out there believing in a God. And people say to me, well, I couldn't go out and share my faith, but actually you should be, because they're hungry. And rejection is not a big deal. I think one thing we have to remember is if they do reject you, and that can come in many forms, but if they do, it's not because they don't like you. The great thing for me as a horticulturalist, as soon as I might start talking about faith, and they say, I don't want to do anything about church, religion, all of that. And I'd say, oh, by the way, look at this camellia. Your camellia looks very chlorosed, And they'd say, do you know about these things? And I'd say, oh, yeah. Give it some magnesium. See, gardening tips for free today. Give it some magnesium, a bit of tomato feed in the spring, and it'll come good. You really know. Would you like to come in? And before you know it, I'd be in their house eating homemade cakes, drinking tea, being shown around. I've been shown around thousands of wonderful gardens. Never paid any entrance fee, and got to share actually why I was there in the first place. So that was a great thing for me. That they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the gospel. And we know as soon as you shine the light into the dark, anything that's in the dark is going to squint and repel. And
here you are, knocking at doors, having that kind of ministry, and then you knocked all the way to India and Africa.
Absolutely.
And you kept on knocking.
Yeah, cool.
Tell us a little bit about where God has taken you, and a little bit about what gave you the vision for that, and how did that all come about?
Well, actually, I've always had a love for travel. Because my dad was in the army, I think I was about 2.5, 3, when we found myself living in Benghazi in North Africa. So I've always had a love for especially Africa. Africa's always had a place in my heart. But Avril and I, when we got married, we decided, I said, well, we're going to have a honeymoon anyway, so let's get married in Kenya. And so we flew out to Mombasa and we got married there. And I can honestly say, whether she'd agree with me, and she's probably watching, so whether she'd agree with me, but the power of that trip was actually the evangelism and sharing the gospel on the beach in Mombasa. The wedding was very special, but it was the importance, and actually opening the suitcase with all the John's Gospels and taking them out was the thrill for both of us. And we've been back, I think, 3 times since. Got some lovely, great friends out there. Still hear from them on email, etc. And so there's always been a love for Africa. And the joy for me has always been in Africa and in India. The fact is you could go out on the street and share the gospel, and they're hungry to hear. Where in England it's a lot harder. So that was always a call to kind of go and do that stuff. So we got married out there, and as I say, we've been back. And then I think we've spent probably 6 or 7 years now working with some of the Indian community from Eastbourne and Polegate and Uckfield. We now call them the Rainbow Christian Fellowship. And through my contacts with them, I just went really to share about my door-to-door work, and have been involved ever since with them. And we meet once a month in somebody's house, and we have a great praise time. But they said, we'd like to support you to go out to India and see where we come from, so you can see something about us. And one of my Indian friends went with me, and we spent 3 weeks out in India and had a fabulous time. Yeah.
How do you find? I mean, when you go to Africa, you go to Asia, different culture, but same people, the same need, isn't it?
People, same need.
I mean, how did you cope with that culture shock, if you like, or not shock, culture experience?
Well, I suppose as an evangelist, I just find it so exciting. I don't care who you are, whether you have a really, really strong faith or a weak faith. When somebody wants to know what it is that makes you tick, all of us love that. There is something in there that's very special. And so the culture wasn't a big issue for me. We shared before we started the program, that when you're in a country where English is not the first language, and I found myself praying for Indian folk who couldn't understand what I was saying. and God revealing pictures of what was going on in these people's lives. That's an amazing time, you know, and excites me and thrills me that you there have to rely on God totally. There's nowhere else to go. When you're praying for, remember praying for one couple, laying my hands on this couple, and God revealed to me that this couple had been striving to have children. And I felt the Lord just say to me, tell them, stop it. I want to use them as they are. And so I said through the interpreter, I believed, can you just tell this couple, don't worry about the children, he wants to use you. And they danced. They were excited and thrilled. And that had to only come through revelation, you know.
Well, it's I mean, we're talking about you and talking about what God is doing, and we're exploring various avenues here. But it's good to just have a look at, we introduced you as evangelist pastor.
Yeah.
Now you've just become you've been doing this home evangelism thing, and then now you've been given a pastorate. Is that kind of locking you up a bit, or is it? Do you feel a bit caged up?
I don't feel caged up. No, frustrated is a good word. But it would be good to share, I think, actually, how it happened, because it always makes me laugh. And to be honest, one of the things that I never wanted, when I became a Christian, one of the things I never wanted was to be a pastor of a church. And as an evangelist, I was a bit of a problem to many pastors. You know, I always saw myself as the grit in the oyster, but I don't think they saw it that way. And so I'd kind of used to get very frustrated and had the great pleasure of going in preaching on a Sunday and then walking away and allowing the pastor to pick up the bits on a Monday, you know. And so pastoring wasn't big. Although I always felt I had a pastoral heart, and that's a kind of different thing. Many people used to say to me, you have a pastoral heart, but being a pastor I wasn't sure about. And I remember back in March last year, and I had a phone call from a friend of mine who said, look, there's this little church, he says, tiny little church in Forest Row, and I didn't even know where it was. He said they've got no pastor, and we're desperately looking for some people to go and preach there, you know. And he said, are you busy in August? So obviously you go through your diary, and August is looking a bit sparse. And I said, well, give us a Sunday then. So I said, okay, and I wrote it in. And like it was yesterday, I remember 3 weeks before I was due to go and preach at this place in Forest Row. Some weeks before, I'd had the pleasure of leading this lovely lady to the Lord in Lindfield, and she'd gone to a pastor and said, "Look, I want to be baptised. Now I've given my life, I want to be baptised." But she said, "The only condition is I want John to be here to help baptise me." And so Trevor phones me and says, "I've got this lady who wants to be baptised." I said, "Yeah, great, I'm there. When is it?" And it was on this Sunday. It was on the very Sunday that I was supposed to go to this Forest Row place. And I thought, well, I'm not really bothered about the church, Lord, sorry about that, but, I want to be at this baptism. And so I emailed out and phoned around all my Christian friends and saying, "Look, are you busy that Sunday? Fancy going to fill the pulpit?" Nobody was interested, nothing. And I couldn't help think, well, is there something wrong with this church that they know and they're not telling me? And so I did everything I could not to go. But had to give in to the fact that actually I put it in the diary and I need to be faithful to these people. So I phoned Trevor and said, "Look, can you just apologise?" And Caroline was fine about that. She got baptised. And so Avril and I, we go, and another part of this story is the fact that because we've been busy on the Saturday, Avril said, "Well, you go to that little church, you go and preach, and I have a Sunday roast ready for you when you get home." Now, my missus, when she puts her mind to something, that's it. That's where she's at, And only the Lord can change that. And 10 minutes before I went to go to Forest Row, she stopped hoovering and she said, "I feel the Lord wants me to come with you. Can you give me 10 minutes to get ready?" And I smiled and I waited and we went there. And of course it was in August when most of Forest Row's gone somewhere else. And we got there and there was like 15, 20 people in this little chapel. And I went there and preached about the fact that God had got a plan for them, and all of that sort of stuff. I preached around the